Today I'm going to be talking about Cossacks 3, developed by GSC Game World, and this game is a remake of the 2001 classic and once again set in 17th and 18th century Europe. The blurb of the game describes it as up to 10,000 units on the battlefield, 12 playing nations, 70 various types of playing units, 100 scientific researchers, and over 140 diverse historical buildings. The single player side of the game gives you either an option of playing missions, which are based on a certain nation at a certain time point in history, or random maps where you just fight to the death against AIs, either in a free-for-all or with an AI team, which is fun for around the first 3 times. Multiplayer is rather disappointing, as I was basically disconnected every 5 minutes when I try to play. There's no direct LAN capability, and you have to log on to an internet server in order to be able to play in a multiplayer, in any type of multiplayer fashion, which is a bit disappointing because the classic games used to have that option of playing direct LAN, which made them so popular in the first place. So Cossacks 3 is a rare combination of war, economy, army developing, building and upgrading that couldn't be found in any other game for the last 15 years, or so they tell us. I'm going to quickly discuss how I feel about each of these points whilst I was trying out the game. So to start off with building and upgrading, apart from buildings like farms and townhouses, mines and warehouses, buildings take a really long time to complete. And this includes walls, which was a particularly irritating point for me, because until I researched an expensive technology in the academy, I was literally building one block of wall out of hundreds of blocks every 7 minutes, and by the time the wall actually eventually finished, the game was almost over and the enemy had come into my base around 20 times by then, so it was pretty much useless. However, there are a lot of technologies, and if you don't research them, you'll quickly get left behind in the game, both militarily and economically, as I found out in my first game after losing every single battle to the same type of units. So let's move on to army development. If you get attacked while there are no troops in your village, you're pretty much done for unless you can get an army back to your base within a few minutes. Now, each unit has a speed in which it can be built. Some expensive units like ships take up to 15 minutes to build one of them. I think the easiest and fastest, or the fastest unit to build, are pikemen, which you can just spam. There is an option to build an infinite supply of units, which is quite nice, as opposed to having to click back on the barracks every few minutes just to make sure production hasn't stopped, because in this game if you stop producing, you stop surviving. There are 3 primary choices of units. There's infantry, which includes pikemen, swordsmen and musketmen. Then there's cavalry, which there's primarily knight type of cavalry with swords and spears, but there are also dragoons, which shoot muskets as well as running around on horses. You also have the option of recruiting mercenary units via a diplomatic house, and these train pretty quickly, but they cost gold instead of any other resources. Your armies have the ability to capture both enemy peasants and buildings, which is quite a fresh change. However, it is extremely annoying when one of the enemy soldiers manages to somehow get through your army lines and just walks around your base, converting every single unit that you have. And then your army turns around and destroys all these peasants, which were a few seconds ago yours, and your entire economy collapses, and then you get destroyed by an enemy army. That did happen. Okay, so moving on to war. The AI in this game is pretty generic and quite boring overall. At the same level of difficulty, they send out waves of the same units at the same time, and they meet in the middle of the map somewhere without actually damaging each other's buildings, and then they turn back and go back to their own bases, because that's what happens in war. The battles themselves are quite fun though, but the units bunch up into little balls of liquid pixels and try to smush at each other rather than maintaining their formations, and which kind of messes up the whole point of having like ranged infantry versus melee infantry, because they all just gets squashed up into a ball of mayhem. Cannons are slow and they miss a lot, but it's always fun to watch a bunch of units, whether they be your own or the enemy's, just exploding into a ball of fire. Once you have defeated the primary army, they generally have one major army and then some little bunches of units hiding around their base somewhere. Once you've destroyed this primary army, you can pretty much just go on to destroy them and eliminate the entire faction from the game, because there's no resistance once that primary army has been defeated and you have more troops to send into the village, which is also a bit anticlimactic. You think they'll put up more of a resistance, but they never do build wars, primarily because the game is over by the time they can be nearing completion. So let's move on to the economy. The economy of the game itself is pretty cool. There are around 6 to 7 resources, including the defaults such as food, wood, stone and gold, and then there's different types of minerals like iron and copper and coal. And you build either a mill for a farm, there's trees which never get cut down, and there's stone which never runs out, and all of the mines are apparently endless, but that is pretty cool because I think it allows for the production of those 10,000 unit armies that they like to talk about. However, the trading aspect of the game is really weak. You can't even trade between your allies, whether they be human or AI. So to end it off, this game has large proportions of everything. It has lots of resources, lots of costs involved in spending those resources, lots of armies with lots of people in those armies, and it has lots of peasants doing lots of menial labor, lots of loading time, and lots of bugs. My game crashed quite often, and it took a long time to load those games back up for some reason, even though the graphics aren't so spectacular. If you've been playing Cossack games previously, or have enjoyed games like I said, Age of Empires, Stronghold, or Empire Earth, then you may enjoy this game, and I recommend you give it a try, especially if they fix the myriad of bugs that currently plague the game. However, if you don't fall into that above category, I would suggest that you either don't get it or try it out and then make sure you can get a refund just in case you don't like it. And that's all for this video. Catch the next one.